Nice to meet you. Chief
Nice to
Kral.
meet you. Zahra Collins.
Nice to meet you. Take a seat.
Thank you. Hi, Chief. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you in person.
It
We've
is.
been on Zooms before.
Yes, we
but
have.
not
A lot of
been-
Zooms. I've never thought I'd miss talking with people in person.
Yes, I'm actually Zoomed out.
I'm Zoomed out too.
Yeah, it's one of those like 2 or 3 a day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I agree with you there.
Why don't you tell me about yourself?
Well, I'm born and raised. Went to Scott High School, graduated from there, went to the University of Iowa, majored in dance and African American World Studies, and came home.
Really?
I've taught dance at the Toledo Public Schools when I first came back, when Libby and Scott had the small school model with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, so I wrote the programming for that and taught. I've worked at Children's Services, as support staff. I've worked at Mix 95.7. Also coached volleyball, so I did a lot of coaching. I coached at Scott when I first moved back home in 2004, around that time. So 2006, I was coaching at Scott, and I coached at Cardinal Stritch. And when I left, like being on like entertainment side of stuff, I kind of went full time with Toledo Volleyball Club. So I was out at Lucas County Rec Center for a long time. Left there in about 14 and been working for myself ever since.
Really?
And actually just got picked up by Toledo Urban Federal Credit Union this year.
Great. Good.
So
I'm a little different. I grew up in Boston. I lived there for 20 years. I enlisted in the Navy in 1984. I'm a lot older than you. And I met my wife in San Diego. She was living with her sister, and she said, the only way I'd marry you is if you come back to my hometown. So I've been here since 1987. I've been with TPD for 30 years. I've been chief for 5. 29-year-old twin sons. One's a detective on the police department. The other one's an attorney in Florida. Cool. So, yeah, this has always been my dream job, and I'm happy to sit down and talk with you.
yeah, well, we have some commonality there. My mom's a twin.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
So
Good.
twins run in our family.
Well, tomorrow is my one son's birthday, and Saturday is his brother's.
Oh, they were born
11/20 and 12/41.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's funny.
Yes. Yes.
Well, but it's good because they get their own day.
They do,
And
but they're 29 now, so it really doesn't matter anymore. They liked it when they were younger, so.
Yeah. See, my sister's birthday is actually today, and her daughter was born last year on the 2nd. Because she said the baby needed to have her own birthday.
Oh yeah, that would not have been good.
Right.
Hello, how are we doing?
Good.
Hi.
Hi, my name's Cynthia. I'll be taking care of you guys and take your order. Are we ready?
I'll do chips and salsa and the poblon.
The full one. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
It's right here.
Yes, that one.
Okay. And please,
I'm gonna be super easy. I'm just gonna have chips and salsa.
chips and salsa.
Yep.
All right, I will be right back. Okay,
All right.
I'll take your menus. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So, yeah.
I neglected to tell you, I have a bachelor's and a master's degree from Tiffin University too. So everything's worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
I have no complaints.
Well, I mean, you're a part of the community.
I try to be. I think it's important that the community knows who the chief of police is. I've really made an effort to get out in the community since I've been chief and talk with as many groups as I can so people have a face to a name and they know my perspective and where I came from. So
Well, that's really important.
I think so too.
I guess part of the reason why we're having these community conversations, and we've been on other community conversations, and so this is part of that ongoing larger picture here in Toledo, is just what has been going on in 2020. We've seen the killing of George Floyd. We've seen the killing of Breonna Taylor. We've seen injustice done on both ends there. We've seen just multiple on top of. And so our community has been responding. And our police department has also been responding. And I don't think, me personally, that those responses are aligned with each other.
I understand that. I don't think there's a person that wears a badge, if they're quality people, that would ever think otherwise when it comes to the George Floyd killing. Quite honestly, our entire country has changed in 8 minutes and 34 seconds or something like that. I think that was just the impetus that said, okay, we're done, in the community. As for the police response, I mean, our job is to allow people to protest. That's their First Amendment right, and we're all for that. We will allow that to happen. We will protect people who want to exercise those rights, but there's a fine line, and a lot of the community and the police, we're never going to agree on the nuts and bolts of it when it came down to it. But when it goes from marching and yelling and protesting and blocking streets to shooting fireworks and throwing water bottles, frozen water bottles and rocks, then and damaging other property, then we have to stop it, because in addition to protecting the protesters, we have a responsibility to not allow people to get hurt or property damage. And we've been blessed here that we haven't seen anything along the lines of Portland or New York City or other larger.
Right, we had agitators go through downtown and break windows and stuff like that.
I'm glad you said that, because that's what frustrates us. Because I don't know how many people were down here. Do you think 900, 500, or whatever the number is. Those agitators that threw the rocks and shot the fireworks and broke the windows ruined it for the people who were really there to demand criminal justice reform.
Right.
And unfortunately, some innocent people got caught up in the fray and got injured. And if that didn't, if people weren't doing the throwing of the rocks, throwing of the frozen water bottles, there wouldn't have been gas
But what
deployed.
about the police response to some of those things that are happening? Because, I mean, if our training is where it's supposed to be, then we don't have police officers taking off their helmets and beating people with them.
Yeah, you're right. And that officer who did that was suspended for 90 days, I want to say, with that.
Was he on administrative leave or?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so is he still being paid on administrative leave?
No. His suspension is going to. There were 2 officers who got major suspensions. One equates to a $30,000 fine. He's off for 4 months, suspended. That means I take his badge, his ID card. He has no police powers. The other officer, he got it for 90 days. I want to say, don't quote me on it because I can't remember. But that means that's about a $17,000 fine that they're paying. And that not only sent a message to those officers, it also sent a message to the other 609 or however many we have here, that we have to do our business professionally.
Well, what else are you doing besides those suspensions? Because it does, a lot of times it boils down to training. And so, it's definitely training, but it's also mental state of being, like how are you capable of actually being a police officer? Are you a part of the community that you're policing? How many police officers actually live in the city of Toledo proper?
50%.
50%?
50% of our officers live in the city. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, the Ohio Supreme Court says it's unconstitutional for. When I came on in 1990,
Thank you.
When I came on in 1990, you had to live in the city.
Right.
That was challenged in court by officers who felt that wasn't fair, that they should be able to live where they want. So that came down. What I want to do, thank you. What I want to do is, next contract negotiations, I want to offer a stipend. I'm going to give you, I don't know, whatever number
an incentive for living in the city.
And I'm not talking about as far outside the fringe as you can get. I'm talking, inner city neighborhoods. At one time, we were talking about trying to find a way of doing, low interest loans for officers who want to move it in the. I've lived in the city my entire life, or since I moved here anyway, since 1987. I feel it's important that I do live in the jurisdiction where I serve. So that's one thing we're doing. And on the training aspect of it, this month, October, we're having a supervisor's training on how to handle, mass gatherings, on how to position people so no one gets hurt, how to make sure that innocent people's property doesn't get destroyed and things that way. So we're going to have our supervisors train first because it's a top-down approach, and then we will train when the weather breaks in the spring our officers. We always do it in the academy, on mass configuration type exercises, and it all comes down to training. We're really looking at, with our training, we have to do what the Ohio Peace Officer Training Commission tells us to do, teaching-wise, but that's just the bare minimum for the
Right,
state.
that's the bare minimum. So what's our above and beyond?
I met with President Velasquez years ago in the flock group. They come in and they do a block. We'll do our cultural diversity or whatever they call it this year, and then he'll come in and say, okay, you learned that from the state. Here's Toledo. And I want to expand that out to the African American and the LGBTQA communities.
So have you thought about possibly bringing in the People's Institute for Undoing Racism? They do that work.
That's the first time I've ever heard of that.
Okay,
that
so
group.
the People's Institute for Undoing Racism is an organization that comes in and they do diversity training, but the lens that they take it from is a submersive lens. So when you bring that group in together, it's laying everything out on the table and really challenging our way of thinking, and that's the only way that we can address our own natural biases, because we do have natural biases. Sure. We see it every day. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but I also understand that mentally there's a lot of officers on the force that's just not ready to police Black and brown people, and that's in Toledo. Just because of the way that they respond to, the way that they have conversations with. I remember being pulled over in front of my house. And I was fine being pulled over in front of my house. The incident that happened, actually, there was a young boy that was pulled over by 2 police officers. They were blocking the entire block. This was probably about 8 years ago. They blocked the entire block off so I couldn't turn off of Detroit on the Prospect. They had a young boy, his bike was thrown to the side. They had him up against a neighbor's car. Not on their car, not, sitting down on the street. He was basically moved up on the car. I went through a private driveway, across and down another private driveway. What they did in turn was leave that little boy alone, and he was able to go home, get on a bike, and they came after me as I was parallel parking in front of my house. They were disrespectful. I was actually on the phone with someone who's now one of your detectives, and he was listening to the conversation, but they were disrespectful to me. I gave them my identification. I didn't have my license on me, but I had a passport. I gave them my license number. I gave them my registration, my insurance. I gave them everything. I ended up with they said I jumped the curb. I never jumped the curb. I drove through a private driveway. They said that I didn't have my seatbelt on. I was parallel parking in the Expedition on a narrow street in front of my house. They said that I didn't have proper identification. Yeah, I mean, basically what it boiled down to when I got in front of Judge McConnell was, I guess you won't be doing that again, Ms. Collins. You have to make sure that you're on your P's and Q's, but you'll get reckless driving and it'll be off in 2 years, Did
you No, obviously I don't know anything about this. It happened so long ago.
It happened a while ago, but I had a lawyer there with me.
Did you go to Internal Affairs?
No, I didn't. At the time, it was like, all right, thanks, Mr. Richardson, for taking care of this. No, Judge McConnell, I won't be in front of you again. See you at Bible study. It was that type of situation, but I was also, much younger than what I am now.
Why didn't you go to Internal Affairs?
I think irritation, just
what does that? What do you mean?
My overall irritation with just even letting it get to that point, and
you just wanted it to
it's
go
over
away?
with. It's done. It's over with. Because the thing is, you go to Internal Affairs, you might say that it's confidential, but there's retaliation for that when you go and make
it's not
reports.
confidential. It's not confidential.
Yeah, I mean, there's retaliation for that, and people feel that. And they understand that, and
that's my dilemma. If you were afraid to go because you're afraid of retaliation, and I'm whether that happens or not, I'm not going to speak on that. But if I don't know about it, I can't address it.
Right.
And that's kind of frustrating for me. I'm not saying about your situation.
Yeah.
I talk to people all the time, and they say similar stories to yours, and some even worse. And I go, okay, well, who'd you call? What'd you do? Nothing. I mean, I need to know about it. I need to know about it. You were talking about officers, if they're ready for...
If they're actually ready for it.
Right.
I mean, so it was really funny because in this situation it was, well, who do you think you are? Excuse me, I'm a college educated woman who's older than you, young officer. You know, like, you should address me as ma'am. If my dad's in the car, you address him as sir. I'm not a little girl. I'm not a boy. I'm not,
I don't disagree. We have to be professional in our job. A lot of people get upset if they feel like they're disrespected. And I'll look at body-worn cameras, footage, and there's a difference between being disrespected and just being matter of fact. There was a person who was retired 20 years ago. He was just mean, but he was mean to everybody. I mean, so, but I agree. I'm a huge one on demeanor complaints. You know, they're in the scale of things, they're minor compared to like excessive force, but that's where everything starts.
Right, because we have to be able to trust you.
I know.
My younger brother is a police officer. He's not here in Toledo. He's a detective in Atlanta. You know, to see him mentally, what he's going through mentally as a police officer and not be able to help him. But then also have the flip side of it, like, okay, but you know, this is wrong, and why aren't people standing up in these departments and saying that this is wrong? You just get to a point where you're literally deflated. And then with the verdict coming out on not even charging Breonna Taylor's killers for killing her, but because for other bullets, that's just ridiculous. You know, wanton endangerment, but you killed somebody. So like, she doesn't even exist. And that's what people feel like. That's how I feel when it comes to things that are happening with the police. Like, it doesn't matter because I'm not a person. I'm not a whole person. So what happens to me and what happens to my community isn't of concern.
I understand your point. George Floyd, I think I was in front of the cameras the day after that happened. And I said they should lock him up and throw away the key for the rest of his life. He changed policing forever. And there's not an officer or not a chief in this country that would ever back that up. With the Breonna Taylor, we have a little different fact situation. A police officer was shot. It's a highly dynamic issue. I know that brings up the no-knock warrant controversy, which isn't going away and which needs to be had. But the George Floyd, to me, is black and white. The officer is completely wrong, completely inappropriate, and he's right where he needs to be. As for the Breonna Taylor, we had an officer shot. She was killed, obviously, in there, and I understand how that could look as a slap in the face that a person got charged for shooting a couple of rounds into a different apartment. I can understand how that would look, but this is we're really not comparing apples to apples when we're talking about both of those.
But when we look at the Breonna Taylor situation, I guess my question is, where's the communication within force? Because if you already have somebody in custody who you're looking for X, Y, and Z, then why continue with that that investigation?
I don't think anybody was. I don't know the facts based on this as well as obviously there. There was no one in custody that I'm aware of. I believe they were looking for her, and again, I may be wrong. I believe they were looking for her boyfriend or whoever the male was in the apartment that night. That's why it was a dynamic warrant that way. And in Toledo, we have so many levels of review and checks and balances. We have crews that scout the place out to make sure we have the right apartment, make sure we have the right house. If it's a duplex, what side? We have, I mean, a police officer just can't write a warrant and it goes. It has to go in front of a judge, obviously. And judges, I've had search warrants. I've written search warrants when I was in the detective bureau, and it's not just like, hey, George, how you doing? How's the kids? Here you go. They ask questions. They examine it, especially in high-risk warrants. So we make sure that we have supervisory review. We really, really work hard to make sure that something like that doesn't happen here. Since these two incidents happened, it's changed the way we conduct business. Let alone put the COVID aside, that we've had to deal with that and the whole unknowns. the officers on the street now, they're being confronted and they're being challenged on every call for service. There's cell phones out there, we're really being scrutinized, and rightfully so. When you have these high profile things like that happen, regardless of where it happens in the country, it changes how every police department, there's 18,000 police departments in the country and close to 800,000 officers. I promise you, what happened in Minneapolis resonated in every police department. And now, we're trying to, it's my job to make sure Toledo's safe, not just from actual crime, but the fear of crime. And there's a lot of mindset out there that from officers are like, I'm not doing a thing. I'll answer my calls for service and I'm not doing anything proactive. And look at the results. We had 43 homicides
that's
this year.
Definitely been going, but I think that comes to the mindset of service as well, because if you're called to a profession, a high stress profession such as this, then you're called to a specific service. Everybody has a calling on their life, and some people.
But you have to admit that, yes, I went from high school to the Navy to here, so I have a service mentality. Some part of your brain has to say, no one signs up to get ridiculed. No one signs up to get threatened, to get killed, to be ambushed. And they want to protect. They do. But when they're afraid of being the next viral video for doing the right thing, even though it appears wrong, it takes a lot. And that's my job. It's my job to keep that motivation up and to keep the high level of training up and to make sure that they have the tools that they need to be successful.
But how do you build and strengthen the concept of service within self? Because you are a public servant. And so as a public servant, you have a job to do. And when you make a decision that, I am, I'm just going to do the bare minimum, then you're no longer a public servant. So what mechanisms are in place within our police department that says, okay, you know what, I need mental health because I'm not up to par? We
have what we call an early intervention system, where if a police officer, and the numbers probably aren't going to be accurate, if they get 3 excessive force complaints against them that the person has injury, our internal affairs will get a red flag, we'll get an email. If there's 3 crashes that was the officer's fault, there'll be a flag. If productivity goes way down, we'll get a flag. Or if George Kral says, this person isn't right, I know this person and something's wrong, we'll get into the early intervention system where they will sit down and with their supervisor or with the training section, and they'll come up with a 6-month plan of action. It's going to be, okay, George, for the next 6 months, you're going to do this. We're going to monitor 5 out of 5 body-worn camera videos a day or a week. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. And if it gets to the point where I think someone may need a fitness for duty evaluation, we go through our human resources and we send them to Lighthouse, and we have a trained psychologist or a psychiatrist sit down and say, okay, here's what's going on, and have that conversation to see if someone's fit for duty.
How many of those are actually happening?
It happens a lot.
Okay.
It happens a lot. You wouldn't think so, but it does.
Outside of being there and being active, my thing is, if I don't see you in my neighborhood outside of you working, then you're not really you're just here to come in and police. So why should I trust you? Why should I think that you're actually here? Because you're not vested. So unless there's an actual vested interest in not just my community, but the things that are happening in the community, the events that happen in the community. And we have the Hill Project, and you guys are out there, and that was awesome. But I also noticed at the Hill Project that the officers that were there until we kind of said something, they were on the fringes at their cars, hanging out rather than interacting with everyone that was there. And I think Danny said it best when he said, the firefighters EMS is like Switzerland. Because they're automatically seen as there to help.
Well,
right.
That's kind of a running joke that they're the heroes, to go to save the
But how
foundation.
do we how do we get the police in that light? Because
that's a good question. I live in the city of Toledo, and where I live, and I'm fully invested in every neighborhood of this city. And it's not just because my badge says chief. It has since I came on. I don't think, I agree with you. I think our officers should be in the neighborhoods more, but I don't think it's a fair representation to say that they're not vested and shouldn't be trusted, because they're not.
But it's a feeling that they're not vested.
I get it.
And so my thing is, I know what officers around me are vested. I know who I can trust and go to and have a conversation with. I know what detectives I can call and have a trusted conversation with. But I'll be honest, Chief Kral, this is the first time I'm meeting you. I don't feel that I can actually necessarily put my trust in you yet. And I shouldn't, because we don't have a relationship. And that's the thing about rapport and a vested interest, is being able to develop a relationship. So if you as a community leader can say, well, I have a relationship with this person, and we're gonna bring this person over here to start developing a relationship with, this other group over here, then that's how you start to build that the visual of the vested interest.
Well,
because
that's
important.
Look at it from my perspective. We have 609 officers or so. Of that, 250 or so are actual street police officers that drive. I have 88 square miles, 275,000 people in this city. Help with the math here. I mean, it's going to be really hard for you to ever see every single person in the police department. People on the east side, they're never going to see people who work in your neighborhood, because we're trying to keep them there. It's incredibly challenging to get relationship building when the opportunity is so few and far between. That's why we try to do things in the neighborhood. I'm moving our community services officers from the Kenwood office. Once COVID ends, we're going to try to find city-owned buildings in each of their districts. So,
But that's a solution to that,
right?
Because
but that's just
you're
one
able
person,
to.
though.
But so there's how many different neighborhoods in the city of Toledo?
We have 8 sectors.
So there's 8 sectors. So there should be a community resource officer for each sector.
I'm not so much worried about the CSO. You know them. I want the relationship
But how do we
to grow.
build a team around them, though?
I want the neighborhood folks to have a relationship with the police officers who run calls for service there, not just the ones who go to the block watch meetings and community services. It's a start. We're going to make sure that we get the community services officers into those districts, but then I'm really trying that that at 1:45 on Wednesday or Thursday, George Kral and Steve Keck are going to be working your neighborhood. That's really hard, because we have turnover, we have promotions, we have transfers, we have people who move around. Beat integrity is really, really important. That's how you're going to say, okay, I know those two. I can say something to them. But it's really, really hard when we are so lacking of resources.
So you're saying it's really hard, but isn't that how we? I guess that's how we build those police community relations. That's what I think police community relations is us figuring out, okay, so you have that resource officer, and then you have this particular precinct that is dealing here. How many actual police stations are still open? I mean, I know
2.
we have Scott Park and we have downtown. So
2.
what happened to the one over there in Savannah?
That's just our traffic sections in there.
Okay.
And our domestic violence unit. That's
so,
it.
but why don't we have actual offices for each sector?
Because I don't have enough people to do that. We used to have 3. The Northwest Station on Sylvania, that was a fully operating police station. You have no idea how many times I get calls for saying, hey, I have in this strip mall on Southwick Boulevard, or Reynolds there right near Southwick, there's a corner office. I will give it to you. That'll be a neighborhood office. I would love that, but I don't have the resources and the infrastructure to actually have officers who that's where they report to work.
So we have a city that has outgrown its police department. The police department isn't.
No, I think we have a police department that is undermanned for the size of the city. If I had 700 officers, then I could have another functioning district station in North Toledo or the east side, wherever the case may be. But as for, like we were talking earlier, the community services officers, that's going to be where they report to work. But in order to efficiently, deliver police services, right now we have to stick with the two big substations. Now, regarding community, I don't like calling it community relations. I like to call it community engagement. And when I became chief, it was, okay, you go to your block watch meeting. Okay, here's your stats. Make sure you cut your shrubs and have lights. That's just the tip of the iceberg. What's underneath is what's important. I want a true engagement where we're sitting down with the Junction Coalition and having productive conversations. We're sitting down with United North and talking with them, the East Toledo Family Center, the Doug, all of those, and saying, okay, here's the Doug. Around the Doug, this is the issues that we're having here. You can't take the cookie cutter approach and put that on the east side.
Right.
True engagement is, hey George, we're having problems at these blocks here. We need this. That's true engagement, and we're getting there.
Yeah, we are. I mean, I was able to say, hey, this bar needs this, with the Tavern and Pub Association, this bar needs to have a camera outside of it. This, we want to do projecting, and we need you to commit to allowing these officers to project down here. So I do agree with that. I just think that it's at sometimes forced and disingenuine. Maybe not on your behalf, but maybe on behalf of the officers that are participating.
See, that's another. You're right. I'm running the police department, and I take everything at the 50,000 foot level. I'm all fired up. You can tell. This isn't just I'm not insincere. This is what I want. It's really hard to get my vision to the other 600 and some odd officers. Otherwise, I don't think we would be having this conversation.
Right.
It's me sending my vision to them, and then making sure that they understand my vision, and whether they agree with it or not, they got to do it.
Now, the officers that are actually patrolling that live in the city, are they patrolling their own areas where they live, or is there an incentive for your beat to be around where you live?
I would love that.
I
would, but the way
how do we make that happen?
Well, 'cause I don't want to force someone to work somewhere where they don't want.
Well, you can give them the option to, though.
Oh, I do. Right now, next month we'll be putting our bids out for where you want to work, what shift you want to work, and what partner you want to work with. So if I grew up in East Toledo and I want to work in my district that I grew up in, I would bid afternoon shift, Central District Station, and pick a partner. And then when you get that shift, you say, hey, watch commander, can you put me on the east side? I give them that option, without a doubt.
How many are actually taking advantage of it?
I don't know.
That would be some good demographics to find out.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll see if I can figure out how to do that. But yeah, I don't track that now. If this was the magical straw that I can hit it and have the way I like, I would like us to have really, and I know the conversations are going to be difficult at times, but I want everybody to put personal agendas on the shelf, personal biases on the shelf, and have the same vision. You and I have the exact same vision on how the city should be. I want us to be able to sit down without us getting our feelings hurt because we're told we're doing things wrong, or we're citing people inappropriately or arresting people inappropriately. And obviously, as chief, I would love to see crime plummet. I would love it. But, and I've said this before, we could have the lowest crime rate in any major city in Ohio, but if we don't have those relationships and trust between the citizens and the police, we're just going through the motions.
Right.
But I'm taking this with me when I leave, and if this is the magic wand, I'm going to keep it.
Well, I think for me is it would be having a force that reflects the community that it serves. And right now, the force doesn't actually reflect the community that it serves. but additionally, the force's education and training is to me is lacking. You know, you can come out of high school and get straight on, you know, oh, well, my dad's a police officer, my granddad was a police officer, and I'm gonna be a police officer too, and I graduated high school, and now I'm gonna go do the police officer, police officer training. And
you're right about the demographics. Toledo is roughly 27% African American. For TPD, we're 13%. I'm happy to say, and I think you probably heard me say this recently, the academy class that's starting next month is 56% people of color, and the last 3 have been the most diverse in 30 years. So we're getting there.
We're getting there.
We're getting there. We're not close.
Right. But also that, because the thing is, I can know that I want to do something right out of high school, but you don't know what you want to do.
Oh, I know.
Because, you know,
we don't let anybody come out of high school and be the police. You have to be at least 21.
Okay.
Firefighters, they'll let you, but the overriding philosophy is, listen, you're carrying a gun.
Right.
At 18-year-old, you're not ready yet.
But even at 21, they're not ready.
I know. I remember me at 21.
You know, so it's that I know that youth is important because you need to be able to be physically able to do the job. But it's also that that minimum requirement, like, hey, is, you know, an associate's degree in something, you know, because you.
The good thing about the younger generation, they're coming on the job much better educated. I went in my class, most of the people were just veterans that got out and they took the test. I think of our last academy class that had 40 people, all but 4 had bachelor's degrees, and there was a lawyer in the last one. So we're getting much more educated as time goes on, which is a good thing. It was really nice meeting you. I enjoyed this.
Well.
Let's keep talking.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
With everything that has happened, I'm a glass half full guy. I'm encouraged that we can fix this, specifically in Toledo. I think we have the right people at the table. I think everybody is engaged and they understand, and we all want the same thing. We may have different ideas on how to get there, but we all want the same thing. And I'm confident that before I retire or get fired, whichever comes first, that we get everything in line.
When it comes to our police department, we do have, you know, great leadership in place. There's the opportunity for growth all the way around, but I think that people's hearts are in the right place, and I think if we just continue to move forward in the direction that our hearts are pulling us to do the right thing and make things better for our city, then we're gonna have the opportunity for our city to be great.